I am not a big fan of the practices from the likes of limited run games and whatever. Mainly because of the idea that you only get one chance to get a specific game in standard or limited edition, and once it's gone forever. Well, now sure, you may find it again on eBay or something like that, but of course it's always sold by scalpers. Screw that fucking noise. I mean, I appreciate the fact that otherwise those same games would never even see a physical release, but come on man, don't limit the numbers of copies like that. Physical media shouldn't be boiled down to rush mode, where you get fucked if you were not ready at a specific time and a specific place to buy it. And no, it's not like they will restock anything. Fuck you for even thinking about that! HDMI does a very similar thing here, and no, of course I am not a fan of it. But seeing how my experience with PlayAsia up until now has always been based and awesome, and HDMI does a good work, generally, I am willing to give them a pass for now. Now, I still think that those limited releases should be increased, at least triple the amount, to give more people a chance to get a specific physical game that otherwise would remain digital only. And digital only games are shit and ultimately worthless. Now, after all of this, I have a few HDMI games over here for the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation Vita and PlayStation 4. And yes, I have Empire of Angels 4 for both the Switch and the PS4, but the footage you are gonna see is from the Switch version. But okay, now let's talk about Empire of Angels 4. This is a game I didn't even know was part of a franchise until PlayAsia sold it as a PlayAsia exclusive. But can you blame me? The franchise was Taiwan exclusive up until that point, and only on PC. Even though Taiwanese developer Soft Star Entertainment has been around since the late 80s and only stayed on PC, in recent years they have branched out to consoles and iOS, which is something I don't even wanna touch. With this, I might actually go back and try to play the other Empire of Angels games, even though they might not be in a language I would understand, but still, I would give them a try. Because Empire of Angels 4 is actually a decent game, at least for what it is. Now sure, it certainly isn't AAA shit, and it's a game that probably could be pulled off on a PlayStation 2, let's say. But still, if you look past that, then you might have a little bit of fun with it. But let's be honest, the most interesting part for many will be the angels themselves, because, well, just look at them. That's fan service! And I argue that we need more of those on the Nintendo Switch. And yes, I will admit that when a game has lots of fan service for cultured brothers, then I am in. I mean, just look at this! And this? Seriously though, I will not degrade Empire of Angels 4 like that, but still, there are some really nice girls in here. Personally, my favorite would be Helena, or Shinma, or Astrid? Damn, I cannot decide, but point is, there should be a girl that matches your taste. And if I mispronounce their names, then sue me. Then I will countersue. We sue back and forth. Forever. But let's look at what's actually going on here. We start the adventure with Nia, the captain of the Valkyrie Kingdom's Legion, and Leona. And seemingly there is a plague known as Namtar fever that transforms people into crazy maniacs that attack everything and everyone in their way. So Nia and Leona, members of the Namtar investigation team, go and try to find out what the cause of the fever is to save their country, Asgard. Now, it sounds like a generic story, but for a game like this, it certainly is enough, and not necessarily bad. But throughout, you will always get new information to keep going and be engaged in what's going on, especially with the new characters that come along the way and join the cause. Of course, all of those characters have their own reasons to join the group, but ultimately they all have the same goal. However, what keeps you going and engaged the most is the interactions between the girls from time to time. Most of them simply work well off of each other. But speaking of which, there are also a few side quests in here specific to the girls to give you a bit more context or backstory to each of them. And seeing how there are 13 girls in your team, there are quite a few quests to do. Not as many as you might think, but I will get to that. The point here is that the story is quite fine for what it is if you don't expect too much of it. It's enough to keep you playing though. Well, okay, the girls alone might keep you playing, but still, you know what I mean. And I will point out that I have no idea if this story and characters actually tie in to the previous games or not. So keep in mind that at this point in time I have not played the previous games nor did much research on them, but that's something I will do in the future for sure. But going back to the girls, obviously they all have different personalities and whatever. Helena is the more serious one, Franny is the cute, funny one, Nia is the every girl one, etc. So again, here is definitely a girl that will match your taste. And look at their portraits here. They were all drawn in a more anime style, and that certainly is awesome. During the dialogue scenes, they appear on screen, and depending on what they say or what was said, they react in a few ways. But sometimes they show little to no reaction, like in here, in a scene where she actually should at least stop smiling. So a few more expressions could have helped the game, especially since these are all still pictures. Throughout the game you can also collect a few cards from the characters. You do this by either opening chests found on the battlefield or defeating enemies. However, that tends to be rare. You always need to collect 4 to 5 cards from, for example, Nia to get access to her portrait in the so-called atlas in the menu. By the way, look at Nia here. Pay attention because I will be back to this. Unless you have already noticed. So these cards are just a little extra that gives you access to not only their portraits, but also gives you data about the characters. Because let's be honest, we all wanna know their measurements and how many times you use them and let them die in battle. Seriously though, I actually like when girls' measurements are included in games as well. So many points on that one. You've already noticed that the girls are chibis on the field. If you get annoyed by it, then yeah, move on. But for a game like this, I did not expect much in the first place, but the devs still put effort in it to make them look good. And weirdly enough, they show more expressions as chibis during battle than during any kind of dialogue. Outside of this part where they are all in danger, but Leona keeps her weird smiley face for whatever reason. And yeah, it can be funny to see how the girls react to different attacks they use, especially when it comes to their special attacks. Like when a character is a cannoneer or when a character is a Pegasus Knight. I did not expect to see a weird looking Pegasus take a shit on an enemy. By the way, she almost learned the jack shot here. But these animations are not limited to your own characters though, because the enemy has the same kind of animations. So it all depends on the classes the characters are in, instead of each character having individual special attack animations. It's a bit sad to see that actually. And no, even if you manage to achieve a 4-star level class while the characters finally have their individual look, their special attack animations still boil down to the class itself instead to the character. So yes, an enemy of the same 4-star level class will use the same attack animations as you. Yeah, not only special attacks but also regular attacks. Sure, they have their own look at 4-star, finally being more true to how they look in the dialogue scenes, or even their portrays before they perform a special attack, but otherwise, don't expect too much. But luckily, you can turn those animations off in the menu if you start to get annoyed by it. And looking at the backgrounds, they are also very simplistic. But seriously, if you expected that much from a game like this, then it's your fault. Yes, I am blaming you. One thing that can definitely be said is that the game overall is bright and colorful. The overall structure of the levels is quite simplistic, with a few obstacles to overcome from time to time, like lava or empty holes in the middle of the field. I bet that was Bugs Bunny who got lost on his way to Albuquerque. And that is the point where you have to use the fly or float ability the characters can learn depending on their class. Unless it's Helena, she can always fly. Either that, or you will have to use a unique skill that certain characters have, like Shinma and her alchemy that allows her to create a bridge for characters to use that cannot fly. Speaking of unique abilities, only a few characters actually have it. Shinma has alchemy, Kehir has her purification that basically purifies an enemy from an untapped fever and lets them fight on your side, or Astrid's open lock that allows her to open up locked doors or treasure chests. However, outside of Kehir's purification, one that will evolve throughout the game, you won't have much use to the other unique skills as much as you would probably hope. Alchemy will mainly be useful in the beginning, where the levels are structured in a way where you cannot cross to the other side of the battlefield without it. But after that, most of the time you will not even need it, because the characters can simply go from area to area without suffering any damage at all. Here's an example of that. Here you only suffer damage if you actually stop on the lava, but as long as you move on to the other side, you will be fine. But worse is the open lock. There is basically only one, maybe two, stages where it's useful once, but other than that, even when it comes to locked treasure chests, those don't appear often enough in the game to actually justify such a skill. Even Mia's Knight's Defense, I actually thought that this would be her unique skill, but it's not. Well, in a way it is, because she starts off with it and usually keeps it up until the end. But in a way it isn't, because anybody can learn it if the character is in the right class, like I did with Matilda. But notice how Teresa, Franny, Tatasha, Dodori, etc. don't have unique skills? Sure, they are not main characters, but it would still have been cool if they had their own unique skills that actually are useful during battle. That would also make the battles a bit more challenging actually. But I forgot about Christian. Outside of Kehir's very useful skill, Christian also has a useful one that allows her to summon her little pet, whatever it is. Okay, let's be honest, it's basically the mascot of the game. That creature can only be summoned by Christian, In a similar way, Yuna is the only one in the group that can summon Bestia in Final Fantasy X. And with him you can do as I did sometimes and use the mascot as a scapegoat to distract the enemy from attacking the characters. It worked for me most of the time actually, so it was very useful. But the creature can also fight. Look at this list. This is a list of monsters you can defeat, and once you defeat those, your little mascot will gain their abilities as well their stats. No, the mascot will not actually transform into those monsters you defeated, unless it's the last one. But before I get to that, you will only get access to those monsters by reaching a specific level on fields you can grind. When that happens, a side quest marker appears on the map and your goal will be to defeat the monster. And yes, these are all the monsters you can defeat. At least the ones you can steal their abilities from. The last one is found on a Colosseum at level 60+, and funny enough, once you defeat her, the mascot will take her form at least on the battlefield. Weird how that never happens up until her, but okay, maybe this happens because she is the only one that looks human? Seriously, no idea. One more thing I need to mention. Notice how the portraits of the enemies is vastly different from their chibi counterparts. And even how those portraits boil down to just maybe 10 different ones in total. Even though the chibi counterparts are mostly all different. I mean, I get that an army is usually dressed the same, but do they need to have the same face? Or how many identical twins can a girl have in this world? Come on, a bit more effort would have been awesome here instead of just copy and paste. I would not mind this all that much if the chibi characters at least look the same as their portraits, but they don't. But now to the actual meat. Let's take a look at the world map. Even though it seems like you will get access to other areas, all you see here is all you get. But that's fine, it still is big enough. You will move from point to point to progress in the story, or grind if you ever feel the need to grind. But generally the game tends to be on the easiest side, so you will not need to grind at all. Unless, of course, you want to grind enough to defeat every single enemy, especially in the Colosseum. Yellow markers point to the story, while grey ones are side quests. But pay attention, because once you change the characters in the world map, simply by pressing ZL or ZR on the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, then you might have access to a few more side quests. So yes, a specific character needs to be the lead character to trigger a specific quest. That's actually a good idea. Nicely done. The game could have used more quests though. And by the way, these red dots exist just because. They literally have no purpose, as far as I can tell. Initially I thought that later in the game these dots would allow you to branch out of the main path in the world map, especially because that actually happens once. But no. Outside of that one time, these red dots are useless. Now, this is a turn-based strategy RPG, in the class of Disgaea, Sol Nomad or Makai Kingdom, but it's the light version of those. So no, don't expect the same amount of depth or anything like that, but hey, because it's the light version of it, Empire of Angels 4 could actually be a great introduction to the genre for people that never played it. In the beginning of almost every battle, and by the way, you always start first in every single battle, you will select your team of 8 and you start the battle. Each character and each class has a certain amount of range available for movement, attack or use their skills. Same goes for the enemies. And then it's a fight to the death. If you are used to games like this, then you will not have much of a problem with it. If you are not, then... well, then you will be playing something else anyway. But give it a chance first. Sure, it requires a bit of strategy at times to overpower your enemy, but usually it's fairly simple, and you can use the same tactic every single time. That tactic is, go up to the enemy and beat their ass. However, if you choose to challenge yourself a bit more, you can try to get those S ranks. Each battle will tell you the conditions to win and to lose, as well extras. Sometimes the condition to win is fairly basic, as in, well, simply defeat the enemy, but there are times where you will see easy and hard, like in this battle. Losing conditions are also fairly basic, but sometimes you shouldn't defeat a certain amount of enemies, otherwise you lose. Extra requirements allow you to get extra money and EXP. This is basically your difficulty level, because you have to go out of your way for these. But even then it's usually fairly easy to achieve. But you still don't need to do any of these extras if you don't want. However, one thing that's missing here is being able to see how many fields your enemy can move, attack, or do whatever. So unless you've memorized everything through trial and error, it's essentially a guessing game and not really gamer friendly. But maybe that's the point, to keep the battles be a bit more suspenseful by not allowing you to know how much the enemy can move and act. But then again, I doubt that, because you can't even see how many fields your own characters can move and act. Well, you can only see that on the battlefield as seen here, but nothing in the main menu. That's a bit of a shame. I mean, the game still is rather easy regardless, but it would have been nice to see those kind of details in your own menu, especially before making the decision to change from an infantry to a knight, for example. But speaking of money, there literally is nothing you can use your money on outside of class upgrades. But to have access to those upgrades in the first place, you need merit coins that you can only collect after beating a main story mission or side quest. You cannot grind for those. So at some point you will have so much money for the sake of just having it, since you cannot use items or anything during battles. The money is almost pointless. And speaking of classes, this is one thing that I didn't like it all that much. For example, Nia starts the story as an infantry, and sure, if you want you can change her to a cleric, which I did not do. I kept the characters in their own starter classes. If you want to keep her an infantry, you can upgrade to a warrior and then to a paladin, as I did. Up until this point it's all fine, even with a transformation that made me think of Sailor Moon, which was a nice touch. Come on, this is Sailor Moon! But once you've upgraded her to whatever, you cannot change her back if you don't like her new class and her new abilities. For example, during this fight I had Leona at level 50 and she was a berserk. Not this berserk. A berserk does not have the ability to heal, and Leona had to fight alone in this battle. And yes, this is her final side quest. She is fighting Qual's Will at level 40! That still has more double of Leona's HP. But still, I should be able to win without problems. Right? I mean, I am 10 levels above her. Well, not as a berserk on her own. Even after I've grinded 5 more levels with Leona, I was barely able to win with her, because she barely does more damage than she takes. Sure, she can usually counter any physical attack, but that's nearly not enough, since she is barely able to avoid attacks, because she is so slow. And once Qual's Will uses her special, yeah, then you are basically done. Yeah, you can basically rewind the battle to any previous round you want, as long as it was your turn, which was something I sadly had to do often in hopes Leona would land a critical hit. But is that really what you want to do? Sure, this case would be an example of a brute force kind of battle, but this illustrates the issue of not being able to change to the same level of class of a character at will. But granted, this was the only frustrating battle I had to repeat multiple times, and you will be fine if you don't let Leona be a berserk at all. But this issue is still worth pointing out. So choose wisely what you want each character to be, because once it's set, then it's set. When the battle is team-based, then any berserk would do fine. But a few battles are singles, and if one of your berserks is in those, then yeah, good luck. Especially when you lose and you can't go back to the world map to do something else. Like grinding. Well, okay, you technically can, but always remember to save the game before each battle. Because you can only reload the game, repeat the battle, or go to the title screen once you lose the battle. Save and save often, manually, because the game does not have an autosave feature, which I'm fine with. But since I've mentioned the rewind feature, this can also be an interesting thing. Now, I mainly used it near the end of the game, but if you want to, you can always rewind to the round you want, even in the earlier battles, and approach the enemies differently or avoid the death of one of your characters or something like that. But even then, don't worry too much. Even if every characters on your team die in battle, but you still win with a single one, then everybody still will get XP. And I don't know if I like that. This makes the deaths of your warriors in battle far less interesting, because ultimately it doesn't matter if they die as long as one survives. They all get the XP all the same. One other thing that annoyed me a bit is that you can't repeat the main story missions at all to get the extra requirements and such, unless you reload or restart the game, or maybe use the rewind feature from the get-go. Once that story mission or even side quest is done, then it's done. It would have been nice if you could revisit those battles to get all S ranks that you've missed. And hey, at least I didn't have a single crash. Sure, occasionally frame drops or the game stuttered a bit here and there, but that tended to happen when my Switch got too hot. I mean, my Switch is pretty hot regardless, but you know. Now let's talk about the camera. You can always move your camera around to be able to see the battlefield better or where your enemies are and whatever. But on certain maps, especially the small and tight ones, this will happen a lot. The camera will move behind a tree or something like that and block your view on your character destroying the enemy. Sure, the tree was already there, but this issue could have been solved if they made the tree invisible for that short period of time, or the camera didn't move at all. But again, this mainly happens only on small and tight maps. Otherwise it works fine, and the overall controls aren't too shabby either. One other thing is the voice acting. I mean, maybe it's just me, I admit, that it's not used to Mandarin, but the actresses seemed more often than not like they were just reading lines, instead of trying to sell a character.
那到底是什么呀？我知道大家可能难以理解，但我的直觉告诉我这件事很重要。各位，
请听我说，我过去曾经在外地听闻，有一名脾气古怪的炼金士也在打探女神圣物的消息。
Maybe the girls are a bit inexperienced voice acting or something, I don't know, but most of them seemed like they were just there. I've certainly heard far worse, especially coming from the West, but still worth pointing out. And no, you cannot get rid of them, so embrace their voice acting with English subtitles. Seriously though, it's not too horrible. It's just somewhat weak. But at least the translation seems to be accurate for the most part. Well, according to people that can speak Mandarin. Sure, some lines here and there tend to be a bit goofy, but I thought it was fairly fine. And since all of this has to do with sound, the music and sound effects were nicely done actually, and could be quite fun to listen to. The only thing that annoyed me a bit is that your team has a theme song, and the enemy has a theme song as well, so each time it switches turns, the theme song switch as well. This can get a bit annoying, especially when you are quick with your turn. And finally, this is a thing that made me question the developers and maybe even HDMI for the very first time. But since I haven't found anything that could be counted as hard evidence, maybe the character was supposed to be portrayed this way? I don't know. But look at Nia in the cover. Did you take a good look? Now, her 4-star class. And now, look at her during the dialogue scenes. See the difference? I still have no idea if this was censorship or if this was intentional. You know, as if the characters all transform into their battle suits before fighting an enemy? You know, seeing how they transform, as if they were Sailor Moon characters here. That's one part I still have no idea what the deal is, but if this is censorship, then I am disappointed in you, HDMI. But even counting that out, is the game worth it? Well, just to support HDMI, Softstar Entertainment and PlayAsia, I would say yes. That's why I have the Switch Physical Limited Edition and the PS4 Physical Limited Edition. But as a game, I would say that it's worth it as long as you don't expect too much of it. It took me around 50 hours to beat the game, and the only thing I did not get were all the Atlas cards, even though I got most of them. But otherwise I got everything, and mostly I had fun playing it. Sure, the fan service certainly helped to have more fun, as did the mostly cute looking anime style girls, but I would say that it's worth getting it, despite the game looking more like an upscale mobile game. But no shitty practices to be found here, like micro shits or loot fucks. But okay, maybe it's not worth getting the game anymore, unless you want to pay ridiculous scalper prices for a physical copy. That's why I don't like those extremely limited run practices at all, so please don't pay scalper prices. You could still get it digitally anytime, so if that's okay with you, then go for it. There is still one more thing to note, and I only noticed this after I edited the video and when I looked at the cover from both. So yeah, pretty late. Notice the difference between the PS4 cover and the Switch cover. This point, and this point. It's obvious, right? So my suggestion is, if you are interested in Empire of Angels 4, get the Switch version. And yes, censorship has no right to exist, in any way, shape or form.